This is George from High-Tech Legion. Over the last couple of years, we've seen CLC coolers bring liquid cooling to the masses, but also over those last few years, we've also seen it be a very, very stagnant field. We keep seeing basically the same two cookie cutter designs over and over and over, just with different brand names. Recently, we have seen entries from Silverstone and from Cooler Master that are breaking away from those cookie cutter designs. And today we're going to take a look at something that's actually radically different. The Antec Kuhler H2O 1250. Starting from the outside, let's get a quick look at the Antec 1250 box. First off, got the Antec logo, next generation maximum performance liquid CPU cooling system. Definitely, this is one of the first times we're seeing next generation that you can actually look at it and say, hey, I see a difference. Quick look tells you right there that there's definitely something different about it. The fan centers are much larger, your CPU block is much smaller, but we'll get into that. Now, moving on. Integrated Pwm fans, as you see here. Dual extra large pumps. That's right, the Antec 1250 is actually a dual pump system. Dual pumps is going to mean better flow and redundancy. If one of your pumps goes bad, you're not going to have your CPU temps immediately skyrocket. You're going to have a pump there that's actually going to be able to back it up, keep some liquid moving. Next, temperature controlled LED. So you do actually have an LED on the CPU block itself, which has become a very popular item, and it does change colors with the temperature of the cooling liquid. Antec Grid software for controlling the Antec 1250 itself, and finally, universal mount bracket. This does work with Intel LGA 775, the 1150 series, 1366 in 2011, as well as AMD, AM2, AM3, FM1, FM2. Now, moving around quickly to the back. Not much to see here we haven't talked about. Full copper contact plate, dual pumps, which are integrated into the fan, two Pwm fans, the color changing LED on the CPU block itself, Antec Grid software for control, and dual fans mounted to a 240 millimeter radiator that we see here. Going around, of course, the side, you get the obligatory, hey, look, it cools much better than an Intel cooler. But then again, what doesn't? And over on the other side, we do get some actual information. Fan speeds, 600 to 2400 RPM, all controlled by Pwm. Get the overall dimensions of 280 by 120 by 27 millimeters on the radiator itself. 27 millimeters being typical for a thin radiator. Moving on, fan pump dimensions. Your fans are 120 by 120. It is 50 millimeters deep, so it's the same height as stacking two fans. Moving down, cold plate is made of copper. And tube length, 11.8 inches. Weight, 2.9 pounds. And cooling liquid is, of course, a safe glycol water mixture. So that's a quick look at the features on the outside of the box. Now let's get a look at the Antec 1250 itself. At first glance, the Antec Kuhler 1250 is decidedly different than anything we've seen before in a CLC cooler. It's decidedly different than anything pretty much I've seen in a liquid cooler at all. I mean, let's start with the obvious here. The pumps are attached to the fan in the middle of the fan. More importantly, it's dual pumps. Now, we haven't seen this before in a CLC cooler. Once again, like I had said, you're going to get more flow, plus you have redundancy. That's huge. In case of a pump failure, it's going to keep cooling your CPU. You're not going to get quite the same performance, but it's going to keep cooling. Now, on the downside of this, since it is built onto the fan and is integrated into the unit itself, you can't replace the fans with any fan you'd like, number one. Number two, if you have a bad fan, you're going to have to send the whole unit back. So that does become a little bit problematic right there. But it's nice to see the dual pump, as I say. Definitely should be a nice performance increase just from the dual pump, more flow. That's been one of CLC's biggest Achilles heels since day one, is the incredibly low flow they were getting from the pumps. Antec addresses this situation nicely with the dual pump setup. Now under there, we see the fans 600 to 2400 RPM, really nice static pressure. at about 4.83 millimeters. So you've got some good pressure there. Static pressure, of course, being very, very important in a liquid cooling setup because you need the pressure to get the air through the radiator itself, or you're not going to get the cooling. You've got that going here. So they've addressed that very well with a well-designed fan for liquid cooling also. Now moving on, say 11.8 inches on the tubing itself. So you've got a good amount of tubing to work with. And down to the all copper, as we see, the TIM is pre-applied. And we'll just pop that off. But you can see it is an all copper contact plate here and a rather low profile block itself. And as you can see, it's notched. Antec promises an easy installation, and that notching on the sides is going to be part of the installation process. Then on the front, as you can see, the Antec logo, and this entire area does light up, and it changes color with the temperature of the liquid within the unit itself. So you get kind of a visual display of what's going on as far as temperatures. Now, moving on, you notice we do have a bit of a cavalcade of wires wiring that goes along with this. One of the reasons being, obviously, the fans, pump, all have to be connected up. So you do have cabling running between the pump and the fans, of course, and power lead, as well as the USB cable. The USB cable is used to interface with the grid software, keeping everything monitored through USB and allowing you to make adjustments through the software. Now, finally, the final piece, of course, of any system, the radiator itself. Nothing really too spectacular here. Very, very standard looking CLC aluminum dual 120 millimeter radiator. Reservoirs on both sides, which is actually kind of nice to see there as well. Less chance of any air bubbles collecting, so you do get that going there. But like I say, aluminum radiator. It's actually a fairly dense FPI, so it is going to need some speed from the fans to get the air moving through there freely. But all in all, a really nice looking unit. One of the things, like I say, it's so different than anything we've seen before in a CLC. And whether it's for better or for worse, remains to be seen until we get it in the case. But it's definitely different. And Antec's definitely, trying to at least make strides and develop CLC further than it has been before. And that, of course, is great to see. We always like to see innovation, and Antec is definitely taking a step in innovating the CLC. Getting a look at the accessory kit. Of course, we start with installation manual. And as you can see, it is very, very well illustrated. Nice, large, clear pictures, easy to follow, and it's a very easy, simplistic installation as well. So not going to have any problems installing it as long as you follow the manual. Next, the H2O grid software is included on CD and can also, of course, be downloaded from the Antec site. Backplate, AMD, and Intel. You also have the option of using the stock AMD backplate. Personally, I do prefer that method simply out of the fact that backplate here is plastic. AMD backplates on their motherboards tend to be really nice, solid backplates, so you should take advantage of that if you are installing an AMD system. Retention ring, bolts for AMD with the original backplate, AMD mounting with the new backplate, or all your Intel 2011 bolts, your inserts for the backplate, as well as screws, isolation pads and sticky for the backplate, which will hold the backplate isolated and hold it into place while you're working. Bolts included if you do want to do a push-pull. There are another set of fan bolts included. And finally, these are actually a great idea. These are a bracket that if your motherboard is too close in your case to the top of the case and the fan mounting, this actually allows you to space the unit out. This would get mounted using these screws up top, and then the Antec 1250 itself would get mounted over here and would actually be able to move it over a little just to give you a little bit more clearance for your motherboard components. Really, really a nice piece. Could use these in quite a few installs with CLCs in the past, and I'm glad to see them included here. Really nice package of accessories and install kit from Antec. Very, very well thought out. Let's take a look at the installation. First step, we need to prep the retaining ring. Now, as you can see, the 4 tie-down points actually move. They are marked AMD and Intel. So you're going to slide them to the side that you're going to be installing on. Then flip over. So you want to make sure piece is jutting towards you. Take small rubber piece and it inserts into the thread there, into this open space. And what that's going to do is hold it in place for the particular installation you're doing. So this way, once these are in place, these can no longer slide. They stay in place, make it very, very easy for you when you're doing the actual installation of the CPU block itself. And retaining ring is done. Next, we're going to move on to the backplate. If you're doing an Intel installation, you want to start working with the Intel word towards you. If you're doing AMD, you want AMD facing you. I'm doing an Intel installation today, and you'll notice these are marked top clips. AMD, they're not marked. You only have one top cutout on each. But for Intel, they are marked 775 on the inside, 1150 series in the middle, and 1366 on the outside. You want to choose what socket you're using and push your retaining nut into the proper place. Obviously, all 4 corners. And give it a little push. It'll lock in. And as you can see, the effect you get, you've got the 4 nuts now sticking through the back plate, and we'll be using that in the case. Next step would be, if you decide to use it, the adhesive tape, which would be placed right there. I personally don't like using adhesive on the back of my motherboard, so I'm not going to use it. It's not a necessity. It's merely to hold it in place while you're working. Personally, I find it easier to kind of work without it, and I don't like the tape on the motherboard. But if you want to make your life a little bit easier, yes, it will hold this there, so it will make it a little bit easier to work with inside the case. But once you've got all 4 in place, your backplate is together, and we're ready to move on to getting the 1250 installed into the case. Before I move on to the next step of putting on the retention ring, I do want to point out one more time that there is factory thermal interface material applied to the cooling block. So you can actually use that or replace it with any thermal interface material that you like. We are going to be taking it off today using Noctua NTH1 thermal interface material. And installing the retention bracket onto the CPU block itself is very, very simple. We've got our retention bracket all together. We want to actually, you'll see the block is notched, and there are notches on the retention bracket itself. You want to make sure that it curves away from the block, the tie-down points. You want to match up the slots with grooves on the retention bracket and simply twist clockwise and lock it into place. Very, very simple. Okay, with everything prepped, we're going to move into the case. First step, of course, is going to be the radiator mounting. Now, I had pointed out that it does come with some offset brackets for the radiator, and I also said they were very important. I wish I've had them before. Really, it's more important with this just because you have these pumps down here, and you've got all your motherboard components, and depending on the offset on the top of your case, you may not be able to get the radiator and the components into position in order to mount it. I can't do it on this case in this position. I mean, fortunately, on this case, I do have a forward position. I can mount it without a problem. I can just pop it right up here and everything's out of the way. However, a lot of people don't have that option. If you don't have room for 320 millimeter fans up front, you're stuck trying to mount back here. As you can see, your 4-pin and everything back here winds up hitting the radiator. It will not line up. So now I could use the offsets, or I can mount it up here. I'm going to wind up mounting it up front just to make it a little bit easier, but I am going to show you the offsets right now. Just to give you a top-down view of exactly what I'm talking about. As you can see, we've got the cutout here for the radiator, and you can see the motherboard components right here especially the 4-pin, are not going to clear and allow you to mount here simply because the components are in the way. So you need an offset either forward. This case happens to be able to mount up forward, but your case may not have room for a 360 in it, and you may not be able to offset it. So you're going to need to offset it out. And that is where those mounting brackets we had looked at earlier come in, the offset brackets, and we're going to put them on and I'll show you exactly how they work. Once the offset brackets are attached, you can see they just mount simply 2 screws on each side and actually moves your mounting point over from there to there, offsetting the mounting of the radiator. So you're going to be able to clear those motherboard components. And in the case, you can see now with the offsets, when we put it into place, we're now clearing everything on the motherboard without a problem. And 4 screws pop right into the brackets themselves to hold the assembly in place. Once you've got your radiator assembly in place, next we're going to start on the CPU block, move on to the back plate that we got together before. It's going to go on. If you're using an Intel, make sure the word Intel faces you. If you're using an AMD, make sure the word AMD faces you. Better yet, if you're doing an AMD and you have the backplate that came with your motherboard, use it. This is a plastic backplate. Use the metal backplate that came with your motherboard if you possibly can. So I'm going to put it into place. On Intel's, the word Intel is actually upside down. As you can see, you've got your notch for the 3rd screw. You need to make sure that matches up. Very simply, if you are using the tape, obviously take the paper off the tape, put it into place, and you're good to go. We'll move around to the front and bolt it in. With everything in place, you can see the nuts sticking through the motherboard in order to screw down CPU block. So simply, I've already gone ahead, put on thermal interface material onto the CPU itself. Make sure you put on thermal interface material if you're not using the factory. And we're going to put the block into place. And simply screw it down with the 4 screws included with spring clips. Once you've got them started by hand, you're going to want to tighten down with a screwdriver in an X pattern, starting here, there, and finally on the last screw. Now these do stop when they are tightened. You won't feel a ton of pressure, they'll just stop. Don't try to over tighten them, you just want to tighten until you feel the stop. Finally, all that's left is the wiring. And like I said, we do have just a cavalcade of wiring with this. Your only connection for power, to power, as you see, 3-pin, you're going to want to go to a fan header. Make sure you turn off any BIOS control of that fan header. You want a constant 12 volts going to it. It's going to be self-controlled, so you want 12 volts going to it. Better yet, I would definitely recommend getting a 12 volt 3-pin to 4-pin Molex connector and going straight to your power supply, but make sure it's a 12 volt connector, not a 5 or a 7. And the other connection you do have is USB, which will go to a USB header on the motherboard, which is going to allow the software to control it. So after making the connections, we'll clean it up and see how it looks. So all installed, definitely got an interesting look in the case. As you can see, much meatier than what we're used to seeing with those pumps dropping down there. You do have the lit up Antec logo for a really nice touch, but you do get a pretty clean install. Once again, there's just so much wiring coming off of that block. I wish there was a way that they could cut down on that a bit. Also, I'm not terribly comfortable with the idea of running 2 fans, 2 pumps, and an LED off of a single motherboard header. So I would recommend, like I say, going to a 3-pin to Molex, 12 volt Molex, very important. Also, once again, make sure you disable any fan control in BIOS to the header that you use. So, like I say, in the case, definitely a nice looking piece, very interesting looking piece. The Antec 1250 uses Antec's grid software interface, which is a very, very simple interface, as we're going to see right here. Now take a look as you bring it up. What you get is an RPM meter on the fans, also digital readout right there. You get the temperature of the liquid, don't be confused by that. That is not the temperature of your CPU. That is the temperature of the liquid within the cooler. Very important to know that. So you're not relying on this as some type of temperature gauge for the CPU itself. Now, up top, 3 settings. See, right now we've got it set to silent. You've also got extreme and custom. Now, at silent, runs the fans typically at about 630 RPM and is very, very quiet. When you move over to extreme, fans will ramp up to about 2200 RPM to start and go up from there if need be, as you see here. You do get quite a bit of noise here. There's no question about that. And finally, we do have custom, which allows you to go through and select the fan level yourself. There's no provision for a fan curve, and as you can see, even 1400, you're getting pretty noisy on this particular unit. Now, there's no provision for setting up a fan curve or anything of that nature. It is just a starting point for the fans. Now, moving down here, you've got your reset, which will reset everything back to normal, and we'll put it back onto silent. And down below, we've got 3 selectable functions right here. First off, settings. You can have it start minimize, so when you boot Windows, it'll just start up minimize. You can change the appearance, just the color itself of the background of the interface. You've got 4 selectable colors. And finally, language. You can select proper language that you'd like to use. Now, moving over to the next one, LED. Right now, we've got it for the liquid temperature controlled, as we saw earlier. And it will actually, inside the case, the LED on the cooling block will change color along with the liquid temperature. And you can start your low temp anywhere you like, and it will build up from there. Now over here, you can go to user defined and use the RGB scale simply to set up whatever color you like in the case, and it will be a static color. And finally, we have a graph setting to bring up a graph chart, as you see here, which will chart your liquid temp or your fan speed. And you can actually log it if you like and save it. And when you close out of there, it's going to ask you if you want to save it. And you can save to a text file if you like. So very simple software. Like I say, I really would have liked to have seen a little bit of a fan curve customization here, really give you a little bit more ability to work with it as far as keeping the noise down and the temperatures low. And get your noise to performance the way you particularly like it. But now that we've seen the software and all it can do, we're going to take a look at what the Antec 1250 is capable of as far as cooling. Getting into the performance of the Antec 1250, first we're going to take a look at the 4770K at stock speed settings with all of our coolers at maximum performance settings. Here the Antec 1250 does very, very well, turning in the best numbers in the group. Now, of course, $120 cooler, you're probably not looking for it to cool a stock CPU. So let's take a look at what happens when we overclock. Bumping it up to 4.4 gigahertz with a little over 1.2 volts going into it. We see that we do get some differentiation here. The Antec 1250 does very, very well against the air cooler and against the best of the 240 millimeter closed loop coolers as well. We do see the Cooler Master Glacier, the open loop, does open up a bit of a performance lead there, but the Antec 1250 does very, very well here, as you see once again. Now, one of the big problems here, though, is with, like we've seen with the CLC coolers in the past, is the noise. The Antec 1250 with this setting is putting out about 69 dB. Obviously, that's not going to be livable while you're sitting in the room. So next, we've tested what can it do with less than 40 dB. All of the coolers are set with a maximum of 40 dB allowed. So now taking a look, with stock settings, the Antec 1250, not a problem at all. Once again, keeps right up with all the other coolers that we see here. Now, when we overclock and try and keep the noise down under 40 dB, you notice that, once again, the Antec actually does the best of the closed-loop coolers in this test. It actually beats out the Silverstone Tundra TD02 and the Corsair H100i with noise levels that you can live with in the same room. It does fall quite a bit behind, though, the Glacier 240L and a bit behind the Fantex as well. It's also giving up some noise there to the Glacier and the Fantex. The Glacier comes in around 33 dB, the Fantex around 35. The Antec we had it pushed up to about 39. We did find we were about 41, 42 dB with the Antec at 1400 RPM, but honestly, that test yielded the same results. So we'll just keep the 1100 RPM and keep it under 40 dB. So that is where it suffers a little bit in keeping it quiet. So all in all, a very good showing, but at max performance, it does get a bit loud. Overall, the Antec 1250 is really a very, very interesting piece. Taking a look at the performance, obviously you really can't argue with it. It kept up with the best of the closed-loop coolers on the market, so it sits right on top of closed-loop 240 millimeter coolers as far as performance goes. Once again, it does get loud, topped out over 68 dB. I mean, that's a bit of an ugly number. The test, keeping it under 40 dB, once again, kept right up, actually tested very well under 40 dB for a closed-loop cooler. Obviously, can't keep up with the open-loop Cooler Master Glacier or SwiftTech H220. It's not going to keep up with air under 40 dB, a big air cooler, but it is going to be as good as any 240 millimeter closed-loop cooler you're going to get. Now, I'm really happy to see that somebody finally is taking some initiative to address some of the problems that we're seeing with closed-loop coolers. One of the big things being, got two pumps here. That's fantastic. Higher, theoretically, you should have higher flow and head pressure than what you're getting out of the tiny little pumps that we're seeing on the CPU block typically. Plus, the redundancy is very nice. If you have a problem with one pump, you're not going to get skyrocketing temperatures, risk component damage. The other pump's going to pick up. You won't have as effective cooling, but you will still have cooling. Now, as far as the implementation of it goes, I don't know if I love it being on the fans. Reason being, if you have a bad fan, typically you would just simply replace your fan. In this case, you've got an entire situation where the unit's going to have to either go back to Antec, you're going to have to get a replacement part from Antec, and you're replacing a pump. Well, no, actually would have to go back because it's closed loop. And you're looking at replacing a pump and a fan, rather than just simply swapping out a fan. So that becomes a little problematic. Also, we saw with the pumps located down here, we did have some issues with clearance on motherboard components. However, Antec did provide the standoffs that made it not a problem at all. I'm really happy to see that. I'd like to see that in more kits, as a matter of fact, even that have just the fan, because you do run into motherboard compatibility issues, and that's a great plus from Antec, throwing those two little pieces in there that really made mounting a lot easier. The installation itself was very, very easy. As far as noise goes, it does a great job under 40 dB, as we saw. I mean, it couldn't keep up with the open loop cooler, couldn't keep up with the big air cooler under 40 dB, but the tests out as well as the best of the best in 240 millimeter closed loop coolers. So really no arguing with the performance. Installation was very easy. Once again, we do have the issues with the noise. Under 40 dB, you don't have great noise to performance. You don't have great price to performance, unfortunately. And that's, like I say, that's going to be inherent with closed loop coolers. But, if you can live with the noise, fine. But if you can't, it's probably not the piece for you. So overall, I'm going to give it a silver award. I like the ingenuity. I like the way Antec is addressing some of the problems. However, with some of the fixes that we see with the dual pump, we also have the situation, like I say, can't change the fans. One pump problem, one fan problem, and the whole thing's got to go back. It's not, simple fix of a fan anymore. You do have some compatibility issues, like I say, with components. If you're mounting in the front with modular hard drive cages, you're probably going to have issues there as well, because you're not going to have the clearance. So you do have compatibility issues. But overall, like I say, silver award. If you can fit it in your case, it runs with the best of the best of the 240 millimeter closed loop coolers. And is going to provide you with the redundant pumps. So definitely recommend it if you can fit it in your case.